Jungi, how you doing?
How are you, Akalom?
Very good, and you?
I'm fine. First of all, I would like to say I'm a big fan of you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Keep telling you how it is. Don't ever change.
Thank you. I promise I won't. I'm way too old to change.
Yeah, same. And my question will be quite long, but I'll try to make it as coherent as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, we've seen Midwinter and Pieces leave the professional, race to world first, the professional raiding scene. Could this be a foreshadowing for Blizzard to taking a step back from hardcore catering to hardcore players and focusing on other elements of the game, which we kind of already can witness with the Dragonflight expansion, because they've introduced some things for casual players? And do you think the professional WoW scene will collapse on itself, or other guilds will take their place and just gonna roll the game to its grave eventually, because it's focused on the race to world first and MDI, which is in my opinion a terrible idea, because WoW is not an esport, never was designed to be one, and it will never work. And kind of a attachment to this question, do you think that the focus on the professional aspect of raiding has supercharged the development and the creation of add-ons, combat add-ons, and the collapse of the raiding scene might trim it down a bit to how it was back in the day?
Yeah. Okay, so to start off with the sort of guild question, and top-end guild quitting, it won't automatically or directly lead to the downfall of the raiding scene. I do think that if Blizzard has any intelligence right now, they realize that this is an indication of an incredible flaw within the raid design. Because every single one of the guilds so far that have quit the World First race have quit for exactly the same reason: burnout. They're done. They can't justify spending weeks trying to get bosses down because there's just too many bosses.
It's not feasible anymore.
Yeah. Look, it was fine back in the day before there was such a thing as an official World First race, because yes, you would always have your top 10, top 100 guilds really try-harding to get the boss down. And to be fair, it was fun, it was good, it was cool, but there was no monetary incentive to be first, or to be second, or to be third. Now that there is a monetary incentive, a lot of these guilds are pushing themselves beyond what we would consider to be healthy in order to get there first. And now is when the real problems of Blizzard's hardcore element of raid design is coming to fruition, which is why I sort of said during Twitch. So on Twitch, someone asked a very similar question, and my idea there was keep raids large, because a lot of people love the idea of having 12 bosses in a raid, this large cathedral sort of thing with the boss's stronghold, and you work your way to the final boss. So keep that for normal, keep that for heroic, but then in Mythic, take 4 or 5 bosses from the raid, the most iconic bosses from the raid, and that is the Mythic World First race. So that's like the hardest content in the game. It's those 5 bosses. They don't drop any gear. They are basically item level locked. They drop a bunch of cosmetic rewards, but that's the World First race. That's the hardest content in the game. It means that guilds are going to spend at most a week or 2 trying to get all the bosses down. It's short enough that it works for a World First race in sort of an esports content or context, but not so long or so exclusive or needed that everyone has to partake in it. I think that's sort of the best of both worlds, because technically I would prefer World of Warcraft going more the Final Fantasy route. In Final Fantasy XIV, there is 1 raid per expansion. The raid opens up 4 bosses every second patch. So you'll get one patch, you'll get 4 bosses. This is one wing of the raid opening up. There's an entire storyline for that wing that you play through and you kill all 4 of the bosses. And then you have to wait 2 patches before the next wing opens up and the next part of the story opens up. However, it's usually raid, alliance raid, raid, alliance raid, raid, alliance raid, right? So there's a new raid or new 4 bosses every patch. It's just alternating between the alliance raid and the normal raid. The alliance raid is for catch up, and then at the end of the expansion you have the full raid that is now unlocked for everyone to do. And then in between that they also launch trials, extreme trials and stuff like that. And then now they also launched an ultimate. So there's a bunch of content there, but it's much more condensed, as it were. It's not 12 bosses at once. It's more 4 bosses, you go in, you enjoy yourself, and then you're done. So I can absolutely see that. Well, Korax, I don't count the Alliance raid as a raid because it's more a catch-up raid, which is why I said there's just one real hardcore raid, like what we would consider in this context as being a hardcore raid, which is the raid. The Alliance raid is a catch-up raid, so it's still bosses, but it's not the raid. It's not the hardcore part of the game. And then the ultimates is 4 bosses that you do. It's about a 20-minute fight, which is the hardest content, according to many, in video games. But I do think, so on that note, the 12 boss system or the 10 boss system is unsustainable for a world first race. It simply can't work. The question we then have to ask ourselves is, should Blizzard adapt their content in order to keep the hardcore audience going, right? So give the world first raiders something to do, or should Blizzard not give a fuck about the world first raiders, because ultimately the world first raiders makes up maybe 0.01% of the player base? This sort of depends on where you fall on it, because I do think having that super hardcore element within the game is cool. People love watching the world first races, and it gives a lot of ordinary raiders something to aspire to, even if they know they're never actually going to get there. It's still a nice thing to think about. So I don't think that it should be removed overall. I do think that the fact that you have so many of these top-end guilds now quitting spells the end of it naturally. So unless Blizzard steps in and does something about it, the end for hardcore raiding is very near. Because these are the players that is more committed than anyone else to doing this content. And if they start quitting because fuck it, I don't care, well, what do you think ultimately happens as a result of this?
I agree with that 100%.
What was the second part of your question again?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it in the lobby before I came here. Is that the creation and the development of combat add-ons was kind of supercharged by the fact that there is now a professional, like there's money involved basically.
Yeah.
And it's got kind of supercharged the arms race between Blizzard creating the raids and the raiders like trying to overcome these raids.
So
and,
I don't.
Yeah. Sorry.
No. I don't necessarily think that, of course, add-ons would become more complex with need. And since these guilds have a lot of need, these add-ons has to be a lot more complex. But if you look at what most of these top-end guilds do, a lot of them don't actually use things like DBM as a priority. Most of them have weak auras, and they have literal people who build weak auras for every single version of the fight. Because the thing is, a lot of these guilds tend to do the raids before the add-ons are even perfect, so they can't really rely on a DBM or a bigwigs to actually help them with these fights, because a lot of the time these add-ons are sort of based on their own kills. So, once they manage to do it, the add-on will finally sort of be upgraded to the point where it needs to be. So, I don't necessarily think, I don't think raiding is the problem. Like, I don't think the world first raiding is the reason for these So, for example, even back in the day, and we were nowhere near a world first guild, but we were good enough that usually as soon as Mythic opened, you know, we would start clearing Mythic bosses, because me and my guild would one-shot normal and heroic in one night. So then the only thing that's left is Mythic raiding. And even for us, usually the first month or month and a half of the raid, DBM and Bigwigs would be broken. Like, it would track certain things not at all, and certain things it would track completely wrong. So we would usually also use things like weak auras, just bold a weak aura to track the ability, instead of trying to rely on an add-on that is just not working at the moment. And those guilds are much better than us. So when they do this, those add-ons are nowhere near ready to carry it. So I would say probably not. That would be my response to it. I don't think the raiding scene can be blamed for a lot of things, but not for add-on bloat. Because ultimately, the people that rely on these add-ons far more aren't really the top-end guilds. It is your sort of heroic guilds that think that they're world-first guilds. They're the ones who overly rely on add-ons to get the bosses down. Do you have any retort to that, or anything you want to add to that?
No, thank you for your answers. I was kind of thinking more or less the same. I think the hardcore, as you said, the hardcore raiding scene is necessary in this game, because it gives people kind of a upper goal to reach towards to. Like, back in the day, you know, people were looking at epic geared people standing on mailboxes, and we need that in this game.
Oh yeah.
So thank you very much for taking the time to answer the questions.
It's my
to maybe asking some other, maybe next time.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, every single week we're here. So if you ever think of any other question, you're more than welcome to ask it. Someone else said earlier in chat, how do you ask me questions? Very, very simple. You go onto Discord. There is a Q&A section on Discord. You write your question into the Q&A. If I don't get to it 1 week, I'll definitely get to it the next week. Morny and Andy can actually provide you with your place in the queue. So they can tell you, listen here, most likely not next week, most likely the week after that. You're number 11 or 12 in the queue, depending on where you are. We do favor people that actually show up in voice. So if you want to make sure that your question gets asked, jump into the voice chat, join and actually ask your question, because that is what's favored. Otherwise, you can just write it there, and we have a system to make sure that we don't miss any questions. And if I've already answered the question, the mods will absolutely link you to my answer, so that you can see what my answer was to the question. I want to thank all of you for coming out, by the way. That is our 2 hours up for the night, actually 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's been an absolute pleasure to once again have all of you here, to spend some time with all of you. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out with me, for spending your afternoon, your morning with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.